WWE Saturday Night's main event takes place on Saturday in Atlanta, and we know it's headlined by Gunther defending the World Heavyweight Championship against Goldberg. We've also got two other matches currently announced, Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton, and Seth Rollins versus LA Knight. We're going to make some predictions for what seems to be an incomplete card, as I assume they're going to add probably at least a match or two more this week, maybe on SmackDown, but this is all we have to go on as we're doing this prediction video, so let's make some predictions for Saturday night's main event. We start with Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton. We know McIntyre just made his return after a much-deserved break, and now he goes one-on-one with the Viper, the Apex Predator, Randy Orton. And we know that Randy Orton has started to let some of that frustration out a little bit when he lost to Cody Rhodes at King of the Ring. And now Cody is headed to face John Cena for the undisputed WWE title at SummerSlam. We saw in that match, Cody was willing to do what it took to get the victory, which is what Orton said he was going to do heading into the match. Cody took advantage of the early injury for Randy Orton, playing off the history of the back and all of that stuff, and we mentioned what Cody did at the end of the match. The exposed turnbuckle, Cody was the person who did not hesitate to take advantage of it and now earn his WrestleMania 41 rematch against John Cena. That has left Randy Orton frustrated. And now we know they're finally hinting towards doing the actual Cody Rhodes versus Randy Orton feud at some point. We've mentioned all the different possibilities that could play out with Cody and Orton over the next little bit, and those are certainly still in play. And for me, what leads Randy Orton further in that direction to get him closer to snapping, perhaps not just on Cody, but on others, right? And I think it is probably losing this match. And I think this is where, if you're going to bring Drew McIntyre back, you're probably thinking, hey, Drew needs to win this match since it is his first back in the fold. And I also think it accomplishes something else where if McIntyre wins this match, then Drew McIntyre moves closer towards a championship match against either Cody Rhodes or John Cena, based on where we think both of those guys could be coming out of SummerSlam. So I think McIntyre winning makes a lot of sense. Yes, you could always have Orton win, and then Orton's the first in line should Cody win the championship at SummerSlam. But I think McIntyre making his return, getting a win here, I think is something that he probably needs. And it also would be a lot of fun, like I said, to see a Drew McIntyre versus Cody Rhodes for the undisputed title, or a Drew McIntyre versus John Cena. If you guys remember way back when, after WrestleMania 40, we did a prediction on what we thought would be the WrestleMania 41 card. And I said, I'm going to make my predictions a year in advance here. And I picked John Cena versus Drew McIntyre. And I still think it's a very compelling feud, potentially, for John Cena before he retires because of how good Drew has been in terms of just delivering the promos and making things real and personal and all of that. So I think that's one we can probably still get to, especially with the thought that John Cena is about to go back to the good side here. And so I would like to see that, and I think one of the ways you can get there is have Drew McIntyre defeat Randy Orton at Saturday night's main event. So one of my predictions, Drew McIntyre successful in his match return against Randy Orton. All right, I'm going to go to this match next because I think this one, again, is kind of going to be one of the selling points of the show, but I also think the other match we're going to talk about may have a few more long-term implications when it comes to storylines. Let's get into Goldberg versus Gunther. Now, I know there is a fear online right now that WWE is going to perhaps have Goldberg defeat Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. This is the so-called retirement match for Goldberg. Although, as Michael Cole has reminded us, Michael Cole asked Goldberg, well, what happens if you win? Well, whatever he said, something about how that's a very interesting predicament, should that happen. And the thing about Goldberg is, look, he deserves a retirement match. No matter what you think about the guy when it comes to five-star matches or lack thereof throughout his career, Goldberg still has been one of the more popular figures in one of the biggest eras in wrestling history, right? He was that. He was a guy during the Attitude Era that simply rejuvenated WCW, came over, can't say he had the best handling in his initial run in WWE, but, he's made a couple of these comebacks now, and to me, it looks like a situation where he's like, hey, give me that final match, give me one more opportunity. WWE said, sure, of course we will, Bill. Hey, you're a legend. We're going to give you this one last shot. And so if they're billing it as a retirement match, if Goldberg has said this is his final match, well, having the title on the line, to me, somewhat feels predictable. To be like, okay, well, it's his final match. He can't win the title, can he? But that's why they've started adding in some of that stuff with Michael Cole saying, well, I've asked him about it, and yes, it is an interesting predicament should he win the match. This is going to be a short match. Like, that's an easy prediction, too, if you want to throw that in. It's not going to be a long match. It's going to be short. It's going to be kind of your special, aggressive type match where it is all action from the time the bell rings until, 5 minutes later or whatever, however long this match goes, right? And so I think this is one where, yes, there is that thought that what happens if Goldberg wins? And is that just something where you have him win, it goes to set up a rematch? A couple weeks later, it's SummerSlam. It is a 2-night event, as we said. Everybody's thinking Goldberg can't win because it's his last match here. They're billing it as such. So surely he can't win, right? That is certainly, I think, a thought. And it makes sense why it is a thought. But I just can't look at this and feel like I can predict Goldberg to win when you think about Gunther's road back to the championship. He gets that huge win against Jey Uso to take the title off of him a month ago. And now, to me, you're setting up a scenario where, based on the interaction they had, a week ago on Raw, I feel like you clearly can be headed in the direction of doing Gunther versus CM Punk for the championship at SummerSlam. And I feel like it is a scenario where if you do that, there's a lot more that comes into play, and we're about to get into that guy who we know could come into play in that match. But I feel like Gunther winning has to be the move here. This feels like something where you're giving Goldberg that final opportunity to get in the ring, one last shot, and that's it. I don't know that it's anything more than that. And so I think Gunther versus CM Punk is a big, big match for SummerSlam should they decide to go that route. And to me, that means Gunther has to win here. So I'm going to pick Gunther to retain the World Heavyweight Championship. But again, you never say never in WWE when it comes to these possibilities of what they could do here if they want to extend this Goldberg thing further. But it's Atlanta. They're billing it as the final match. And I just think this is the one where Goldberg gives it everything he has, but yet Gunther perhaps comes out on top. Okay, now we get to Seth Rollins versus LA Knight, which to me is the most interesting match on this card as it is currently announced so far. We know that Seth Rollins had himself a pretty good night on Raw on Monday, as it was Braun Breaker destroying Sami Zayn, Bronson Reed hits a couple tsunamis on Jey Uso, and then Seth Rollins gets the win over Penta and via nefarious means in the main event, until, of course, LA Knight came out and got the better of Seth Rollins to ruin the party a bit on Raw. And so, I always say, if you're the guy that's standing tall over your opponent on the go-home show before the actual bigger show, that's not good, because that was the whole Attitude Era joke, right? Anytime you're someone who gained the upper hand, well, you better guarantee the guy that's laying on the ground is going to win the match. But however, we still got to get to SmackDown, and there's still a scenario there where I think Seth Rollins and company can stand tall over LA Knight just due to the numbers game and all of that. Everywhere I look, I see a lot of things out there that, come on, it's Seth Rollins, it's LA Knight, Rollins holds the Money in the Bank briefcase. He's clearly the person that's getting the bigger push right now. Rollins has to win this match. He can't lose as the Money in the Bank briefcase holder, who then could maybe cash in a couple weeks later and win the championship. You can't have him lose this kind of high-profile match on Saturday night's main event. My response to that is you absolutely can have him lose, because we've seen this before many times in the past. Now, I'm not saying it was always right, but because Seth Rollins does have the Money in the Bank briefcase, he is still 1 3-second pinfall away from being a world champion. And when you look at LA Knight, if you guys remember the discussion we had a month ago leading into Money in the Bank, I picked Seth Rollins to win the match. But then I did the follow-up video where I'm like, if you really look at this, at some point LA Knight has to win a big match. He's now 0 for 3 in the last 3 Money in the Bank matches. He's still getting huge support from the crowd. And I would say, actually, right now, it's probably as entertaining to me in terms of how they're using him. They're having him pop up out of nowhere. He feels a little bit more unpredictable. Those kind of things. I find that as fascinating as maybe anything they've done with him over the past several years. And so To me, this is a match where I think anywhere you look, you could look at the betting odds, any of this other stuff that we always look at and are like, okay, well, that's clearly telling us something about how this match could unfold. But I'm telling you, I think LA Knight needs to win this match because, yes, I know Seth Rollins has the numbers advantage. I know he has Bronson Reed and Braun Breaker, but so does everyone else. We all know that, right? And so it would seem easy and very predictable to have Seth Rollins simply win via underhanded tactics. Someone interferes, and there's your story, right? Rollins wins again, and he's got momentum heading into SummerSlam, whatever that looks like for him, right? But I'm going to go out on a limb here and pick LA Knight to beat Seth Rollins as my prediction. And I don't know that I even expect to get this right. I just am kind of trying to maybe will it into the universe because I do think LA Knight needs a big win. It's one thing just to go out and have the fans cheer for you and, yes, react to your catchphrase and all this other stuff. It's the same thing in a similar sense, not exactly the same, that we talked about with Jey Uso, right? Yes, the fans are still invested in Jey Uso beyond him losing the championship. But it is something where at some point he had to win something meaningful to take it maybe to the next level. And it did. When he won the championship, when he won the Rumble, it did take Jey Uso to another level. And again, I'm not saying everyone had to agree with it, but I think LA Knight needs to win this match. That's just a personal opinion. I don't know where they're headed 6 months from now, 2 months from now, whatever. But I think he needs to win. And I think you can still do it where maybe you have CM Punk involvement here, right? You could have something like that. Or, to get to my fourth prediction, I am still going to go with the idea that Roman Reigns returns at Saturday night's main event. And I just think it makes a lot of sense for all the reasons I told you guys in the previous video we did here on the channel. This is where, yes, you could have Reigns come out after you have all kinds of chaos in this match, and maybe Reigns is the person that helps LA Knight win. Or maybe Seth Rollins beats LA Knight, and then Reigns comes out afterwards once you get the, probably pretty obvious attack from Seth Rollins' crew on LA Knight, and Reigns is one of the people that comes out, to help, right? Because why? Because they've taken out Jey Uso, they've taken out Sami Zayn, Penta we know has been involved, so maybe that's how you do it. That could be a possibility. But I still look at this and think, if we're looking ahead to SummerSlam and we're starting to connect the dots, we know it's Cody, John Cena. It seems like, based on the recent interaction, you could easily do CM Punk versus Gunther. And to me, I'm like, well, what's another big match you could do? What is Seth Rollins' match? Because he's the other person that's still out there. I mean, it just, unless there is a reason why they can't do it, I just feel like Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins just makes a lot of sense, right? And so I'm going to stick with that idea for now. And if you are going to do Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns at SummerSlam, to me, this is the place to kickstart it. Because like we said, there are very interesting parallels, kind of the same way Cody Rhodes returned at the last Saturday night's main event. It's prime time, it's NBC, and as I mentioned in the previous video, AEW is running their biggest show of the year on the same day. You want the talk coming out of Saturday night's main event to be something really big. Now, that could be Gunther losing the championship to Goldberg. Goldberg winning the championship would be a huge story. But to me, the bigger story is Roman Reigns returning. And so we've made this prediction, I don't know how many times now over the past month. And so far, we've gotten it wrong every single time. But I'm just continuing to look at this and feel like he's got to come back sooner rather than later. Not saying he's going to be back as a regular person on WWE television. But you've got to think that we are getting closer to that. And it feels like, based on some of the rumors and reports we talked about in the previous video, they're gearing up for Roman Reigns to return. This would be the most logical place to do it. You just don't know how it's going to play out. Like I said, is it going to be Reigns returning that impacts an LA Knight win, or is it going to be something that comes after a Seth Rollins win? That's the big question. But those are some of my predictions for Saturday night's main event. As I said, I don't expect to get all of them right. The LA Knight one, I think, is maybe going out on a limb for some people. But as I said, I just think I think he needs to win, because that also does what? Quickly, I forgot to mention this. If LA Knight wins and Seth Rollins eventually becomes the champion, well, then that's an easy program to go right into after Rollins becomes the title holder. LA Knight has beaten Seth Rollins. That gives him a clear opponent at some point in the near future. And it puts LA Knight in a position where he becomes closer to winning a world championship. So I just like the way that could play out. We'll see if it happens. But you guys let me know, as always, what you think. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button as well. Always appreciate your feedback. And let me know your big predictions for Saturday night's main event.